Today's content framing question is, what does a deeper exploration of descriptive details reveal in Coming to America? So today you have two craft questions that are going to be answered towards the end of today's lesson, and that is, how do I engage and orient the reader in narrative writing? Again, thinking about escape, right? And the second craft question is, how do I improve engaging and orienting the reader? Narrative writing. Hey third graders, so this is the first part of your classwork for today for lesson 19. Instead of having like a separate warm-up assignment, I just included it today in one document so that you don't have to keep going back and forth within Google Classroom. And so the first part of today's lesson is going to be listening to an interview of an immigrant, and her name is Leona Turkin. She is originally from Ukraine, and so this is an audio clip of her experience at Ellis Island and immigrating to the United States. So what I want you to do is I want you to listen to the audio clip first, and then I want you to write down one fact that you learned from her story. All right? And you're going to type it down right here in that box.
Tell me then about settling down in the United States
Well, do you want to hear my Ellis Island story?
Yes.
All right, my Ellis Island story. When we came across on the Olympic in 1922, I think it was November, my mother was so excited because they had sighted the Statue of Liberty. And so she told my father, she put us to bed. My brother was an infant in arms. He was born in Poland. And she put us to bed, and she said, let me go look at the Statue of Liberty, and I'll come back, and then you go look at it. Well, my father, too, was so excited that he couldn't wait. So he wrapped us in blankets and took us up on deck, and we looked at the Statue of Liberty. The next day, they got into Ellis Island, and they went through the inspection, and my brother was burning up with fever. He was a child in arms who was being nursed. They took him from my mother, and she had no idea what was going to happen. She was very fearful that they might send him back. She spent 3 terrible, terrible days because she couldn't find anyone who could explain to her what they were doing with her child. But they kept us on Ellis Island. And 3 days later, they brought my brother back well. And she was so overcome with joy that she made a pact with God. And she said, someday, I hope this child will do something wonderful for this country. Well, during World War II, my brother was a doctor stationed at the Port of New York.
All right, for the second question in your classwork, you are going to be looking at illustrations on pages 22 to 29 of Coming to America, and I want you to choose and explain how the people in one of the illustrations feel using evidence from the illustrations and text. So that means that the next clip of this video, I'm going to be showing you the pictures of the illustrations from pages 22 to 29. And kind of similarly to what we did in Family Pictures a couple lessons ago, where we pretended we were writing in the perspective of the little girl at the fair in Reynosa. I want you to pick someone or a character on one of these illustrations. And I want you to think about how you think that character feels. Okay, so for example, I think I'm going to choose the family on page 29. And I think the family on page 29 feels happy. Because they are finally able to enter their new country and be together. Everyone is smiling. Here's my evidence. And the man is hugging the wife and children. They all look happy and relieved. And I know that they're relieved because they went through a very long journey together and they finally reached their destination. Like when we think about when we are trying to reach a certain goal and we finally get there, right? We feel a sense of relief. So that is also evidence from our illustrations and text. Mostly illustrations for my example, but you can also use the text for evidence to prove why you think the character feels a certain type of way. Okay, so the next clip is going to be just me flipping through those pages. You can pause the YouTube video when you get to a page that you would like to write about. Now I'm going to replay the read aloud of Coming to America, specifically pages 22 to 30. And I want you to note here what made Ellis Island a positive experience and what made Ellis Island a challenging experience based on these pages that I am rereading to you. Okay, so for an example, what made Ellis Island a positive experience was that the long journey was finally over, right? Long journey was finally over. So here you don't have to write complete sentences. You can just jot down notes. Okay. What made Ellis Island a challenging experience is that even though the long journey was finally over, people still had long lines and they had more waiting to do. Okay. So these are two examples that you can include. So if you're paying attention to the video, you can use my examples for the first row. And so you need to just come up with two more examples for a positive and a challenging experience here. Okay?
As big passenger ships entered New York Harbor, the immigrants caught their first glimpse of what they hoped would be their new country. They saw the Statue of Liberty, a welcome and inspiring sight. The travelers were relieved that their journey was over, but they worried about what awaited them on Ellis Island. Inspectors from the island boarded the ships at anchor to check the passengers. Wealthy passengers traveling first class were usually allowed to leave the ship right away. The inspectors looked for signs of contagious disease among the others. Those who were ill sometimes stayed aboard the ship or were sent to other islands to recover. Those who seemed healthy were taken to Ellis Island. On the busiest days, so many ships arrived in New York Harbor that there were long waits just to get to Ellis Island. Sometimes the wait was so long that people had to live aboard ship for a few extra days. Once on the island, there was more waiting. With thousands arriving each day, long lines formed everywhere. First, the immigrants were given a quick examination by doctors. Those with health problems were marked with colored chalk. The doctors would examine these persons more closely. Some people were kept on the island for observation. After 1911, Ellis Island had its own hospital to treat the sick. Sometimes immigrants had permanent health problems that would make it hard for them to work. This often meant that they would be sent back to their native country. but most of the new arrivals passed inspection and moved on to the next step. Now the immigrants were asked a long list of questions. Inspectors asked their names, where they were from, and how much money they had. Since most of the immigrants did not speak English, they needed help in understanding and answering the questions. Translators did what they could to help the inspectors and newcomers understand one another. Even though it was difficult, most managed somehow to answer all the questions. Mothers often spoke for children who might be too little or too scared to speak. The immigrants had to show that they would work hard and stay out of trouble. Usually the ordeal was over within the day. When they received their entry cards at last, the immigrants could officially enter their new country.
So now, after rereading pages 22 to 30 of Coming to America, I want you to write down a list of words that might describe the emotions or feelings of the people entering Ellis Island. Thinking about what you just jotted down of what made Ellis Island a positive experience and what made Ellis Island a challenging experience. Okay, so I want you to jot that down here. And once we have everyone's words, I can create like another document where we can have all those words together so you can take a look at what your classmates have also said. And I will also include in the next, I'm going to show you in just a moment, the character traits and feelings chart that we made a couple months ago so that you can see some examples of what are some feeling words that you can use. But please also try to think of your own. So here's that character feelings and traits chart that I will attach to today's classwork so you can refer to it. All right, so this is the second part of your lesson for today, and I want you to notice these two monuments. If you know what they are, if you recognize them, that's great. If you don't, that's okay, because I want you to just look at them, look carefully at the image, think about the elements of art that we've talked about so far during the school year. I want you to notice the color, the size, the composition, right? Because today we'll be talking a little bit more about perspective. And I want you to answer the following 3 questions. First question is, what do you notice about these images? Second is, what do they have in common? And third is, do you think these structures are pieces of art? Why or why not? Okay. There's no wrong answer for these, but please tell me what you notice, what they have in common, and if you consider or think that that these structures are pieces of art or not. All right, so before we continue on with the explanation of what these 2 monuments are, I want to define for you what a monument is. And see here, monument is a noun, and it's a building that honors a person, event, or idea. Perspective means how things are seen from a particular point of view. We've talked about this when talking about point of view. And finally, scale, which is also described, or a term that's used a lot in art. It's a noun, and it's the size of an object in comparison to another object. So we've also talked about this when we talked about composition as an element of art, right? Looking at how big and how small things are in an art piece. So scale is comparing 2 sizes of 2 different objects. Okay. So the first monument on the left is located in Washington, D.C. It is also known as the Washington Monument. And the second monument that you see on the right is located in St. Louis, Missouri, and it's called the Gateway Arch. So the Washington Monument was designed by Robert Mills to honor George Washington and was completed in 1884. The Gateway Arch was designed by Eero Saarinen to recall the westward expansion of the United States and was completed in 1965. So how does a monument honor a person, event, or idea? Well, a monument is so big and public that it shows that the person, event, or idea is really important. It also has a special shape or design that makes you think of that person, event, or idea. And it may include words or images that help us better understand the person, event, or idea. So how do the Washington Monument and Gateway Arch fit the definition of a monument? Well, the Washington Monument honors George Washington, the first president of the United States, and the Gateway Arch honors the growth of the United States as Americans moved west.
Therefore, the Washington Monument and the Gateway Arch make people remember important people or events. Now, how does the Statue of Liberty fit the definition of a monument? The Statue of Liberty is a monument because it was built to honor the idea of liberty or freedom. So the last part of your written work for today's classwork is going to be writing an introduction paragraph using the information or details that you wrote down yesterday for your ESC part of your graphic organizer for narrative writing. I will show you a picture of what it looks like in the next part, but first I wanted to show you that you are going to write your paragraph here. All right. I just wanted to show you this writing model that should look familiar to those of us that have been at BCS for a couple years. So this is what is taught in first and second grade when you are introduced to narrative writing. You should recognize the acronym CSPER. C standing for characters, S setting, P problem, E events, and R resolution. And so you'll notice that a lot of the parts or elements of the narrative writing model from before is similar to escape. And so escape is going to be the one that we are going to use in third grade as well as fourth grade and fifth grade. But I want you to see how we take what you've already learned in first and second grade and we apply it to third grade and on. And so I just wanted to show you how it's similar and how we're building off your old model or prior knowledge. So the information you wrote here in the ESC established setting characters is what I want you to use to write your introduction paragraph. Also, I want to emphasize that the prompt for your writing piece is creating a story about an illustration. Again, you are making it up and make it creative. All right, so what I want us to try this week and next week is I want us to practice fluency. So I know we used to do this back when we were in school, but I do want us to continue to practice reading out loud because it's super duper important that we continue to practice this. It's an important skill. And so I'm hoping that I can call you next week and you can read this passage to me on the phone and so that I can hear you reading fluently. Okay? So what I want you to practice for this week as well as next week, I'll let you know when exactly this is due, but I do want you to practice reading this passage every day until I test you, okay? So again, Coming to America by Betsy Maestro. Immigrants settled and farmed this land before it was a country. Others created a new nation and founded its government. Immigrants built the cities, roads, and railways of America. They have toiled in its fields, its factories, and its mills. Immigrants, too, have made the music of this land, written its books, and recorded its beauty in paintings. The spirit of American strength and independence is the spirit of its people, the spirit of its immigrants and their children. Maestro 37.